The courtroom was silent, save for the steady ticking of the clock on the wall. The jury had returned, their verdict final. The judge adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and spoke the words that sealed a man's fate. The defendant, Thomas Grayson, is hereby sentenced to death by lethal injection. May God have mercy on your soul. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Some nodded in grim approval, others whispered in hushed voices. Thomas sat motionless, his hands cuffed, his eyes fixed on a point far beyond the judge's bench. He had expected this. The evidence was overwhelming, and the jury's deliberation had been brief. The gavel struck once, echoing like a drum of finality. 2 guards lifted Thomas by his arms and led him away. He did not resist. Death row was a world of its own, silent, cold, forgotten. A long corridor of steel bars and flickering fluorescent lights. The inmates rarely spoke, their eyes hollow, their bodies waiting. Thomas spent his days staring at the walls, counting the cracks in the ceiling. At night, he dreamed of the past, his mother's voice, the scent of rain on the pavement, the laughter of his younger brother before the world turned dark. He knew what they called him outside. A monster, a killer, a man who had taken a life and must now forfeit his own. He had made peace with it, almost. A priest visited him once a week, offering words of comfort, but Thomas never responded. What use was salvation when the clock had already begun to count down? The night before his execution, a guard stood outside his cell, clipboard in hand. "Guard, your last meal, Grayson, what'll it be? Thomas steak. Medium rare, mashed potatoes, a bottle of cold beer. Guard, no alcohol, Thomas, then just the steak and potatoes." The meal arrived on a metal tray. He ate slowly, savoring every bite, the flavors richer than anything he had tasted in years. The guards watched from the other side of the bars, their faces unreadable. Afterward, he lay on his cot and listened to the distant hum of the prison. His heart was steady. He did not pray. He did not weep. Morning came with the sound of footsteps, heavy, unrelenting. The door to his cell swung open. 2 guards, the warden, the priest. "Warden, it's time." Thomas stood, his chains rattling as they cuffed his wrists. The walk to the execution chamber was short, but endless. He could feel the eyes of other inmates peering through their bars, silent witnesses to the final steps of a condemned man. The chamber was sterile, white walls and a single gurney in the center, straps, needles, a heart monitor that would soon fall silent. "Priest, any last words, son?" Thomas considered the question. His whole life had been a string of regrets, of moments he wished he could take back, but none of it mattered now. "Thomas, no." They strapped him down. The needle slid into his vein, cold and sharp. A doctor stood nearby, nodding to the executioner behind the glass. The warden read the order aloud. The chemicals began to flow. First a numbness in his fingertips, then his arms, his chest. The ceiling blurred, his heartbeat slowed. The world dimmed. The last thing Thomas saw was the reflection of the sunrise in the glass window, a golden light spilling over the horizon, warm and endless. And then, nothing.